Welcome to the Point of Convergence podcast. I am your host, Grant Lira. Get ready to sit down, tune in, and implement. Remember, the knowledge you learn here and anywhere else in your life is only worth something to you if you use it. So get implementing after this episode and enjoy.
And I was lucky because the hospital that I was seen at is it's called the Royal National Orthopaedic, and it's the European Centre of Excellence for orthopaedic surgeries, nerve surgeries, cancers, that sort of stuff. And I'm sitting in the orthotics department of that one day, and they go, volunteers wanted for the hospital radio, which is a radio show. Most hospitals in London have them, and they're a group of volunteers that go up, see the patients because it's quite lonely in hospital, take a request of them, play it on the radio, provide free entertainment. And this is back in the days, so nothing digital, very analog. The beds they had a speaker at one end of the wall, an air tube, like the old headphones for airlines, and it's just the air tube and you plugged it on, that kind of system. So I was doing that. I was just doing general volunteering, and then I joined up with a guy called Graham who did the adolescent ward. So between 4 and 18. So specialist orthopedic hospital. So you've got children in there with cancers. You've got children in there having limbs removed. You've got children in there with scoliosis, a bent back. Have you ever heard of scoliosis before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they operate on them and they strap them into these really tight boards to straighten their back. So kids that are having a terrible time, and for their parents, it must be the most horrific thing in the world. But the kids don't have the frame of reference to understand why it's bad. And so all they want to do is be kids and have fun. But what I discovered is that the volunteers, so Graham, who's the guy, he'd been, at the time I was 24, he'd been doing this radio show at this hospital for the entire time I've been alive at the point I joined.
Wow.
And he'd go up to the wards, and we used to have a joke, because I call him Graham the Housewife's Choice Rich, because he'd talk to the parents, the mothers, and he was very popular because the kids liked him. He was a teacher. He is a teacher, and so that was what he did. But no one would speak to the children. So you go to a bed, and if you go to the parent, oh, yeah. It's like, what? Who are you trying to do this for? So... Yes. Essentially, I followed him for about 3 weeks, and then, as I want to do, I gradually started taking over. And basically, here's what I've discovered. A lot of people do a lot of things, and they measure entirely the wrong set of parameters. They don't really know how effective something is. So this is pre-digital. They've got these earphones, and so you don't know if the people you've just spoken to in the ward are listening. They might have had visitors come, they might have a doctor come, there's any number of reasons they won't be listening. And I thought, well, that's no good. You need to measure a way that they are interacting or not, or else all the work you do is a waste of time. So the typical way of doing it, and I've been in 4 hospital radios, the typical way it's done is you go up to the ward half an hour before you're going to go on air, you get the song, you go, we're going to be on in half an hour, and listen up. What I did was I went to the ward 2 hours before the show, and with my team I do 3 circuits of the ward. So the first time around I go, hi, how you doing? I'm Jonathan. Have you listened to the hospital radio while you've been here? And they're going to go, no. And I go, oh, you have not lived. Tune in the hospital radio, give them the headphones. Blah, blah, blah. I go, right, yeah. And I go round, and as I went round, talking to all the kids, getting them aware of the radio. Then I'd go round and I'd have a bag of, well, I don't know what the sweets would be called in your country, but like Maltesers, for example, and jelly babies. Probably transfers, and I go to them, so which do you prefer, Maltesers or jelly babies? Hold the sweets out. And they go, because you see, that is it's called a trial close. It assumes they want one of them and they choose. So it's about getting the engagement. First you introduce yourself, then you let them know what it's about. Then you do that with everybody, so no one's left out. Then you go around and you say, "Oh, which do you prefer?" And they give you an answer, and you go, "Oh dear, 6 of the other beds won that as well." Because basically, what I'd do was I'd have a competition every week, and it was basically based on the idea that I kidnapped an animal and was holding it hostage in the studio. So we had sheep in the sheets, wolf in the walls, elephant with an ECG, donkey on diamorphine. I'm sure there was something else as well. But basically, they had to phone up and do those animal impressions on air, because only when they phoned did I know that they were listening. And it's called an appointment to listen. So I'd hype them up. And then the third round, what I'd do is I'd speak to the child. I'd go, "Listen, I just want to speak to your mum or your dad, just to the side. I'll bring them back in a second. Is that okay?" They go, "Yeah, sure." And then what I do is I get the parents, had a little recorder, and because of the anxiety of the parent, they don't communicate how proud, how happy, how much they love. It's worry. So I'd record them saying something beautiful to their child, and that changed their perspective. And then I put that into the system and play it out during the show. So this show, I used to listen to heavy metal, wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt, but now I listen to electronic dance music. There's a guy called Christopher Lawrence, and it's like a dun, 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 dun. So you'd have all these other shows on this hospital radio with people going, "Oh yes, hello, and this is record by," and there's me going, dun, 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 and I had a crowd sound effect, so it went, "Ah!" I go, "Good evening," ah! And it honestly, it was. So we did this show at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday night in a children's ward. They fucking stayed attention. They paid attention. They interacted. Sometimes I get 12 phone calls from a 16-bed ward. Now that's what I measure. So to do all of that, I cut out comedy clips, I scripted the intro, I sorted out team dynamics, all this sort of stuff. That took my attention away from feeling sorry about myself, focusing on the pain, taking loads of drugs to try and get away from it, because I was working on behalf of someone that I felt worse for, because at least I was on a motorbike. That was my choice. You have a bent back or a cancer and you're 9, I need to get a fucking sense of perspective, basically. And that saved me, because sooner or later I would have died.
So isn't that interesting? So after that accident, you had all of this, like, obviously living with all this pain, looking for these different escapes to kind of put yourself somewhere else mentally and not understand like where you're at. You wanted to escape that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you tried just about everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Nothing worked.
No.
But then through providing your like energy to somebody else who did not have like the choice, like you said, you had the choice, you were on the motorcycle, they didn't, they were in the bed, they were born with it, whatever. That's when you really found your escape. That's when you really were able to start, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but living your life again, it sounds like.
Well, the thing was, I'd been trained in neuro-linguistic programming the 3 years prior. So in the middle of the drug and alcohol abuse, I trained in NLP for my job at Yellow Pages. And NLP is about modeling, but it's about, sorry, I'm having a pain twinge at the moment. It's about state. So I did not recognize in myself what everyone has always recognized about me, that I give off this, and I thought I was making the children happy because that was what happened. But no, the children are happy anyway. All they need is someone to reflect off, and the joy rises. And it's the feeling of elation that at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, I'd go to the person who'd won the competition, "Hang on, we'll be up with you by 10:15. And take the prize straight up to them, and they'd still be there waiting. And, you know, I have actually got a tape, but I won't put it on this, but, you know, I've got an example of the show, and it's just crazy, crazy shit. It was very fulfilling. I spend my own money on the prizes. I spend my own time cutting out comedy clips. I'd write the script. I'd go up and volunteer. So volunteering typically 3 hours on a Sunday night. And yeah, they saved my life because they gave me purpose.
How crazy is that? So finding like, I just think that's really cool because you had like all these different ways of escaping, and it ultimately ended up that the most effective thing for you wasn't only free, but you were actually giving like your time for it. You were
Yeah,
giving something, you were putting something and focusing on that. And now with NLP and that kind of stuff, you mentioned something earlier about like the beats, the music, stuff like that. I
mm,
want to fast forward, kind of go on to what you've been doing with that, like why that's important. We've talked like
absolutely.
once about NLP before, but I really want to hear
Yeah.
your professional take on it as well.
So basically, I learn NLP, and when you learn anything, you have what's called conscious incompetence, conscious competence. No, I can't remember actually. There's 4 levels where you don't know what you know what you know, but you're still trying. You're succeeding, but you still are aware of it, and then you're succeeding doing the thing automatically, unconsciously. And as it turns out, I have a particular type of brain. I took this information in specifically. Perspectives. So taking it's called perceptual positions. So you might take the position of the person you're talking to and a position of a fly on the wall to gain more insight into the communication process. But that requires you to imagine other people's perspectives. And I now realize that's the thing that other people find difficult. So loads of people get trained in all these things, or they go to a Tony Robbins seminar or something like that. I saw an Oprah show with Tony Robbins. He uses NLP, but he's rebranded it for his own thing. I saw the seminar, and from that seminar, I created something by watching it twice. Whereas I know people that will pay $5,000 a ticket and go and see him every year that he's doing his thing because he's their high. So they're not actually learning from it. So fast forward a couple of things, right? So uh, basically, NLP in a professional context allowed me to communicate change. I was in a department called change management, and so operations, IT, all these other departments, people don't like change. I ironically had been forced into a position of change in my own personal life, and then I was seconded, so short-term contract into this department, and started using NLP to help with the communication. And there's a book called NLP at Work, and it covers it all, and I've read it all a couple of times, and you read it and you forget it, so it becomes natural. And that was what was happening in the hospital radio. But we'll have to fast forward, and we'll be here all night. So 2003, I fell over and broke this wrist. So I've only got one arm. I fell over and broke this wrist, and as I fell backwards, can you see that
Yeah.
scar?
Yeah.
So that is because I went to hospital. They set it in a little plaster cast about this long over the wrist and the hand. The following day, I'm trying to eat a sandwich. It goes breaks again. So they had to put me under general anesthetic, manipulate the arm, and I had a cast from my fingertip to my elbow with my hand like that for 12 weeks. And that traps the medium nerve, the nerve associated with RSI. And so I can't now feel the tips of my fingers. And I had to have surgery at that Royal National Orthopaedic to get my hand to work again. Nearly lost that hand. That would have been bad. And then Christmas Eve that year, my mum dies suddenly, medical negligence. And then in the following 3 years, I had 5 TIAs, mini strokes, 2 of them when I was driving, and I had an experience where you had one vision there and one for each eyeball, and I had to close one eye to get home. But I'm 35 at the time, so you don't think it's going to be a stroke. So I didn't bother to even go to the doctor until the 5th one when I started limping. And because I lived so far away, so I moved closer to the office, and I kept my doctor back at where I was born and brought up. And so to get an emergency appointment, my dad had to come down and collect me because I couldn't drive because my right leg didn't work. But by the time I got to my appointment, it's starting to work again. booked me in for MRI just to be safe. 3 days before the MRI, I'm walking out of the house to do a hospital radio show with Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood under my arm on the drive. I'm like, now I don't know how long I was there, but at some point I managed to drag myself up the step, over the step, and over the front door, over the lip of the door of my house, and I am very reliable, I think it's fair to say. So my mobile phone was on the settee of the couch because I'm not really a mobile person, but the two speed dials were the hospital radio station and my dad. And I phoned the hospital radio station, and I thought what I said to them was, I'm feeling a bit tired, I'm not coming in tonight. What I actually said was, luckily they went, fuck, he's having a stroke. Then I phoned my dad and said, yeah, I'm feeling a bit tired. I think I'm going to go to bed. But actually what I said was, and then I tried to get into the toilet, and I'm sweating. And if you've seen cows with BSE when they just can't, flailing all over the place. So I never got back up on my feet. And I'm trying to go to the toilet, and I'm sweating, and just I'm screaming out. And the front door had to be broken in by the police to rescue me. They take me to hospital. It's a Friday night, so the consultants aren't there. So for 3 days, I didn't know what it was.